I want you to close your eyes for a second and really try to put yourself in this exact physical space.
It's a pretty terrifying space to be in.
Oh, absolutely. So it's dusk, October 8th, 1804. You're standing on the freezing, windswept beach of Presqu'ile Point, just looking out over the dark expanse of Lake Ontario.
Except you can't actually see the lake, right?
Exactly. You can't see anything. A
Yeah.
blinding early-season blizzard is howling directly off the water. It's blowing this severe northeasterly gale.
So it's basically an absolute, completely disorienting whiteout.
Right. And the temperature's just plummeting well below freezing. The snow and sleet are, driving into your face like shards of broken glass.
I can just imagine the noise.
Yeah, the deafening, chaotic roar of the wind. But then, through all of that, you hear a single desperate sound cutting through the dark.
A ship's cannon.
Yes. Just a massive booming blast crying out for help from somewhere in the pitch-black void over the freezing water.
Which is horrifying, because if you're standing on that shore, you know exactly what that sound means.
Exactly. It means a ship is out there. It's completely blinded. It's trapped against the wind. And, it is basically begging the shore for a beacon.
So your survival instinct kicks in.
Yeah, you and the others on the beach just scramble. You fight the wind. You pile up wet, frozen wood. And somehow you manage to light a massive, roaring bonfire on the beach to guide them in.
Just desperately hoping they see it.
Right. And you wait. You stare into that whiteout, watching the flames whip violently in the gale, expecting the wooden bow of a schooner to emerge from the storm any second.
But the ship never arrives.
Never. The cannon doesn't fire again. The silence just closes back in.
It is a profoundly chilling image, and honestly, it's the perfect place to start, because what you've just described is the final, confirmed moment in the life of the HMS Speedy.
Right, an 80-foot Royal Navy schooner that vanished into the depths of Lake Ontario with every single soul on board.
And it didn't just take its crew down. It claimed the lives of Upper Canada's absolute elite. In doing so, it essentially erased the political ruling class of a young colony in a single night.
Which birthed one of Canada's most enduring, terrifying maritime mysteries. So, okay, let's unpack this, because this isn't just a basic story about a boat that sank in a bad storm.
Not at all. There is so much more to it.
Yeah, so our mission for this deep dive is to basically reconstruct this doomed voyage minute by minute. We're going to explore the sheer claustrophobic terror of the human experience for the passengers trapped down in that lightless hold.
And we really need to investigate the bizarre geographical anomalies, the dark local legends, and just the staggering human hubris that set them all into an underwater grave.
Absolutely. So where do we begin?
Well, if we really want to understand the horror of the Speedy, we can't start with the storm. We have to start with the anatomy of the ship itself.
Right, because it wasn't just a regular vessel.
No, it was a ticking time bomb built out of total paranoia. So the Speedy was constructed in 1798 at the Point Frederick Navy Depot, which is right near modern-day Kingston.
And it was built in this absolute panicked rush. Right?
Exactly. We have to look at the geopolitical reality of 1798. The British authorities in Upper Canada were terrified. The American Revolutionary War wasn't that far in the rearview mirror.
So they were constantly looking over their shoulders.
Yeah, there was a perceived imminent naval threat from the newly formed United States. The British felt they desperately needed armed ships on Lake Ontario, and they basically needed them yesterday.
Right, but when you rush massive military construction projects in the late 18th century, you aren't just cutting corners.
No, you're making catastrophic compromises with the laws of physics.
So what was the biggest mistake they made?
The most fatal compromise they made was the use of what they called green timber.
Okay, unpack that. What does green timber actually mean for a ship?
Well, in traditional shipbuilding, you chop down oak or pine, and then you let it age. You season it. You let the natural moisture slowly evaporate out of the wood over years so that the timber stabilizes.
Which takes a really long time.
Exactly. And the builders of the Speedy didn't have years, so they chopped down fresh, living trees, milled them, and immediately built a 200-ton warship out of them.
Wait, let's actually look at the mechanics of that, because it's horrifying when you think about it. Unseasoned wood is practically a sponge.
Absolutely. It's totally full of water and sap.
So if you build a hole out of that, what actually happens when it hits the water and starts to age?
It literally begins to tear itself apart. As the green wood slowly dries out over the years, even while sitting in the water, the cellular structure of the timber shrinks.
But I'm guessing it doesn't shrink evenly.
Not at all. It warps, it twists. The planks literally pull away from the iron fasteners. The drains where the ship is supposed to be watertight just start to separate.
Wow, that is a nightmare.
And on top of that, the sap and moisture trapped inside the unseasoned wood creates the perfect environment for a fungal infection known as dry rot. So the structural integrity of the ship literally dissolves from the inside out. It becomes spongy.
Okay, it sounds like being forced to fly through a hurricane in an airplane where the aluminum is actively turning into powder in front of your eyes.
Yeah.
You're just sitting there listening to the rivets pop, watching the wings detach.
That is exactly the environment. I mean, by the time of this fatal voyage in October of 1804, the Speedy was only 6 years old.
Which sounds brand new today.
Right. To a layperson, a 6-year-old ship sounds great. But in 18th century Great Lakes shipbuilding terms, a green timber ship at 6 years old is practically a senior citizen on life support.
It's falling apart.
Completely.
Right.
It was suffering from massive structural failures. It was plagued by continuous leaks. I mean, the wood was so compromised by rot that the fasteners were slipping out of their holes.
And we really need to get a sense of the physical dimensions of this thing because it drastically amplifies the claustrophobia of this story. The historical records list it as an 80-foot vessel, but that's incredibly misleading, isn't it?
Highly misleading. The hull itself, the actual wooden box where human beings could stand, was only about 55 feet long.
55 feet. That is nothing.
Right. The rest of that 80-foot length was made up by a 20-foot bowsprit, which is the large spar sticking out the front of the ship. So your actual habitable zone is a 55-foot rotting wooden box.
And it wasn't an empty box either.
No, it had 2 main masts, and it was carrying 4-pound naval guns. Those cannons added immense, concentrated dead weight to a deck that was already struggling to hold itself together.
I want to talk about the psychological horror for the baseline crew. Not even the passengers yet, just the daily, inescapable reality of serving on the Speedy.
It would have been miserable.
Because you don't just sail a rotting ship, right? You actively fight it every single second to keep it from dragging you to the bottom. I read that just to keep this ship afloat, even in perfectly calm, flat, sunny waters, 2 men were required to constantly operate the manual bilge pumps.
Endlessly. We really need to strip away the romanticism of tall ships here.
Yeah, it wasn't glamorous.
Not at all. A wooden ship's bilge pump in 1804 wasn't a mechanical switch you flipped on. It was an elm tree pump. Essentially a hollowed-out log with a heavy leather valve inside.
So it's completely manual labor.
Grueling, full-body physical labor.
Yeah.
You were grabbing a massive wooden lever and deadlifting it up and down to suction freezing lake water out of the bottom of the hull and dump it over the side.
Wow. Imagine that creeping existential dread. You're a young sailor on this ship. Your shoulders are burning. Your hands are completely blistered and raw.
You're exhausted to your very bones.
Exactly. Standing in the cold, pumping water out of the bottom of the boat.
Yeah.
And, with absolute mathematical certainty that if your arms give out, if you just stop to rest for 10 minutes, the water level rises, the center of gravity shifts, and the ship sinks.
It's terrifying.
That is your everyday life. The ship is actively trying to die, and only your physical suffering is keeping it alive.
It really breeds a very specific kind of fatalism in a crew.
Yeah.
And, Captain Thomas Paxton, who commanded the Speedy, wasn't an amateur.
He knew what was going on.
He was a highly experienced mariner on the Great Lakes. He knew exactly what his ship was. He knew it was a coffin made of green timber. But he was an officer in the Royal Navy. And in the Royal Navy, you follow orders regardless of your personal survival instincts.
And the orders he was given for the first week of October 1804 were basically a death sentence.
Yeah.
When you factor in what he was asked to carry.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you know your ship is a floating coffin, the only reason you sail is if the cargo is more valuable than your life. And on October 7th, Paxton's cargo wasn't just valuable, it was the entire political apparatus of Upper Canada.
It really was.
The Speedy was ordered to travel from York, which we know today as Toronto, to a newly proposed district town called Newcastle, located right on Presqu'ile Point. And the whole purpose of this voyage, to hold a murder trial.
But we have to understand, this wasn't just a routine assize court. This was a massive political event designed to send a message.
And because of that, they overloaded the ship.
Disastrously overloaded. We're talking about somewhere between 20 and 39 passengers crammed into that 55-foot rotting hull, along with Paxton's crew of 6.
The passenger manifest is staggering. It reads like a who's who of Upper Canada's ruling class, mixed with a profound cross-section of the society they were trying to control.
It's a very tense mix of people.
Let's break down exactly who was stepping onto this doomed deck.
Yeah.
First, you have Captain Paxton, who we know is already terrified of his own ship. Then you have Ogetonicut. He was an Ojibwe man, and he was the prisoner.
Right.
Ogetonicut was accused of killing a trading post operator named John Sharp. But the context is crucial here. Ogetonicut didn't just murder someone for money. He killed Sharp to avenge the murder of his own brother, a man named Whistling Duck.
This is a vital piece of the historical context because Whistling Duck had been killed by a white settler, and the British colonial legal system did absolutely nothing about it.
They just ignored it.
They completely ignored the murder of an indigenous man. So, Ogetonicut, following traditional indigenous concepts of justice and blood feud, took a life in return. He killed John Sharp.
And suddenly, the British authorities cared very deeply about murder.
Exactly. They arrested Ogetonicut, intending to use him as a scapegoat to assert the dominance of colonial British law over traditional indigenous law.
Which is incredibly dark.
And he would have been kept below deck on the Speedy, almost certainly in heavy iron chains, completely helpless in the dark.
And traveling with him, breathing that same damp, freezing air down in the hold, was the very legal apparatus that was sailing out to hang him.
The irony is just heavy.
It is. You had Justice Thomas Paxton. He was a Supreme Court judge, and remarkably, he was only 27 years old.
Very young for that position.
Extremely. Then you had Robert Isaac de Grey, who was the first Solicitor General of Upper Canada, essentially acting as the chief prosecutor, and Angus MacDonald, a highly prominent defense lawyer and a member of the House of Assembly.
The concentration of power is hard to overstate. It's the equivalent of putting the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, the Attorney General, and leading members of Parliament onto a single, dilapidated city bus and driving it into a tornado.
That's a perfect way to put it. And the list of passengers just keeps going. John Fisk was aboard. He was the High Constable of York and the man personally responsible for transporting Ogetonicut.
And Fisk's story is tragic in its own right.
Yeah, Fisk is actually recognized today as the first police officer to die in the line of duty in Canada. There was also Simon Baker, a young man who was enslaved by Solicitor General de Grey.
So you have enslaved people, prisoners, politicians.
Everyone. There's John Stegman, a surveyor who was a former Hessian mercenary. George Cowan, an interpreter who bridged the gap between the British and the indigenous populations. Jacob Herchmer, a wealthy loyalist merchant.
All of these men representing every facet of colonial expansion, packed shoulder to shoulder into this tiny, groaning space.
And then amidst all of these powerful men, you have the ultimate heartbreaking tragedy of this manifest. Tucked away among the elite politicians and the shackled prisoner, there were two young, unnamed children.
That detail, it just absolutely haunts me.
It makes my stomach turn. We don't even know their names. Their parents were traveling to Newcastle as well, but they were taking the overland route.
Which was brutal.
Yeah, in 1804, traveling overland meant hacking your way through dense, muddy, untamed wilderness. It was exhausting and really dangerous. So the parents either couldn't afford passage for the whole family on a ship, or they just wanted to spare their kids the misery of the overland trek.
So they made a choice.
They looked out at the harbor, they saw the HMS Speedy, they saw the cannons, they saw the Royal Navy uniforms, and they thought, that will be safer. We'll send the kids on the military ship and meet them there.
It's a devastating realization. I mean, they handed their children over to the military, trusting the institutional authority of the uniform and the crown, completely unaware that the ship was rotting from the inside out.
Actively taking on water.
Right, and held together solely by the exhaustion of two men working a bilge pump.
But let's look at the actual reason they were all there. Why cram the Supreme Court, the Solicitor General, the defense, the witnesses, the accused, and a bunch of civilians all onto one compromised boat? Why not just hold a trial in York, where they already were?
This is where we see the bitter, fatal irony of the entire situation. This trial was essentially political theater.
It was a show.
Exactly. The government had decided to establish a new district capital at Newcastle, out on Presqu'ile Point. They had just spent a small fortune building a grand 3-story courthouse and jail out in the middle of absolute nowhere.
But a courthouse in the wilderness is just an empty wooden building. It doesn't mean anything unless you demonstrate its power.
Right. They needed a spectacle. They needed to christen the building with a high-profile execution.
To legitimize it.
Yes. They were bringing the entire weight of the justice system to this remote outpost to legitimize the new capital. They wanted the indigenous population and the local settlers to see the full, terrifying majesty of British law.
It's just so much hubris.
Oh, it gets worse. They even brought 6 handwritten, bound copies of the Upper Canada Constitution with them on the Speedy. Think about the sheer arrogance of that.
It's mind-blowing.
They were dragging the foundational sacred documents of their society, their highest judges, and their most prominent lawyers into a rotting ship, risking everything just for a political photo op, or basically the 19th century equivalent of one.
So the stakes are incredibly high, the ship is terrible, and the passenger list is a powder keg. Now we move to October 7th, 1804, the day of departure. And this is where the timeline of hubris really crystallizes into horror.
Because the weather is turning.
Right. Captain Paxton wakes up, he looks at the sky, he checks his barometer. He is a Great Lakes sailor, and he knows the microclimates. He knows a severe late autumn storm, what sailors call a November witch, even though it's October, is brewing.
And he also knows his ship is riding incredibly low in the water because it is dangerously overloaded.
So Paxton does what any sane, rational captain would do. He goes to his superior and he begs for a delay. He formally requests to wait out the weather system.
He essentially says, the ship is heavy, the timber is weak, and the sky is turning black. Give me a few days.
But his superior isn't a sailor. His superior is Lieutenant Governor Peter Hunter. And Peter Hunter is an autocrat.
Oh, totally. He is a military man who cares about schedules, discipline, and the projection of power.
He doesn't care about atmospheric pressure.
Not at all. And he certainly doesn't care about the complaints of a subordinate captain regarding a ship's timber. Hunter flatly refuses the delay.
And he didn't just refuse, did he?
No, he orders Paxton to sail under direct threat of a court-martial.
We have to understand the mechanics of that threat. In the 1804 Royal Navy, a court-martial for refusing a direct order from the lieutenant governor isn't just a slap on the wrist.
It means Paxton's career is instantly destroyed. He faces public disgrace, loss of his livelihood, and potentially a brutal stint in a military prison.
He is entirely trapped. If he stays in port, his life as he knows it is over. If he sails, he risks the lives of everyone on board, including himself.
It's a paralyzing, impossible choice, driven entirely by the political hubris of a governor who would be watching the storm roll in from the safety of a dry, warm office in York.
So, Paxton obeys. What else can he do? He goes back to the docks. He has his crew cast off the lines on the morning of October 7th. And immediately, literally within minutes of trying to leave the Queen's Quay in York, the Speedy runs aground in the mud of the harbor.
Because it's so monstrously overloaded, the draft of the ship, the depth of the hole below the waterline, is sitting far deeper than it was designed to. It plows straight into the silt.
And they are stuck there. They are trapped in the mud of their own harbor for 6 excruciating hours.
If we look at this from a psychological perspective, you have to view this grounding as a glaring, terrifying omen. Imagine the toll on the passengers.
You'd be so on edge.
You're already nervous. You saw the captain arguing with the governor. You know the captain didn't want to leave. You can feel the temperature dropping and see the storm clouds gathering.
And now you're just sitting in the mud.
Sitting in the mud for 6 hours. You are listening to the green timber hull groan, creak, and pop under the unnatural stress of being wedged in the shallows. The weight of the cannons is pressing down on a hull that is being pushed up by the mud.
I can just imagine the vibration. You're sitting below deck, and you can feel the constant rhythmic thudding of those 2 crewmen desperately pumping the bilge water. Because the grounding has probably widened the gaps in the hull and made the leaking even worse.
Right. Every single hour that passes while they try to pry the ship off the mud, the sky is getting darker, the wind is picking up, and the collective dread is just compounding.
But they do eventually get it moving.
They finally manage to warp the ship off the mud bank late in the day. They sail east out of York. But they aren't heading straight to Presqu'ile yet. They make a brief, scheduled stop at Port Offshore to pick up a few more people. This includes the Farewell Brothers.
The Farewell Brothers. They're a fascinating pivot point in this story. They were business partners of the murder victim, John Sharp, so they were key witnesses for the prosecution. The Crown needed them at the trial.
Now, the Farewell Brothers were frontiersmen. They weren't politicians from the city. They lived off the land, they understood the lake, and above all, they understood survival. When the Speedy pulls up off the coast of Port Oshawa, the brothers take one look at it. They see an 80-foot schooner that is wallowing in the swells, sitting dangerously low.
They see the decks crowded with nervous people in fine clothes.
They probably hear the groaning of the unseasoned wood and the relentless splashing of the bilge pumps discharging water over the side.
And the Farewell Brothers look at this magnificent representation of British naval power, and they say, absolutely not.
No way.
They flat out refuse to board the ship. They tell Captain Paxton to his face that his ship looks completely overloaded and fundamentally unsafe.
Which is an incredible, damning statement on the physical condition of the Speedy, because the Farewell brothers still had a legal obligation to get to the trial in Newcastle. They couldn't just stay home.
So what did they do?
Instead of boarding the heavily armed Royal Navy warship, well, wait, I shouldn't pause like that. Instead, they choose to paddle an open bark canoe.
Let me stop and highlight how insane that is. An open canoe into a brewing late autumn storm on Lake Ontario.
It sounds like a death wish, honestly.
I cannot overstate how terrifying the Speedy must have looked for two experienced outdoorsmen to look at a flimsy wooden canoe, look at the darkening, violent sky, and say, yeah, the open canoe is definitely our best bet for survival today.
It tells you everything you need to know about the aura of doom surrounding that ship. The canoe actually sets off alongside the Speedy. They try to travel together.
But as we move into the afternoon of the next day, October 8th, the weather rapidly and violently deteriorates.
It gets so much worse.
This is the descent into the whiteout. This is where the nightmare cruelly begins to unfold. The wind violently shifts. It turns and starts blowing hard out of the northeast, driving straight down the length of the lake.
The temperature plummets below freezing.
Right, turning the driving rain into a severe, blinding blizzard.
The canoe obviously gets separated from the ship in the chaos of the rising swells.
Did they survive?
The Farewell brothers, relying entirely on their frontier survival instincts, managed to battle the waves, ride the surf, and eventually drag their canoe ashore. They survived to tell the tale. But the Speedy is now entirely alone in the deep water.
Let's put ourselves below deck for a moment. I want to really emphasize the horror of this environment. Picture the interior of that 55-foot hull. There are no windows. It is pitch black, lit maybe by a single swinging, sputtering oil lantern hanging from a beam.
Just absolute darkness and shadow.
The temperature is freezing, and the air is thick with the smell of vomit, fear, and damp rot. You have 20 to 39 people crammed shoulder to shoulder.
You have the elite politicians in their soaking wet wool coats.
And Ogetonicut shivering in his iron chains, unable to brace himself against the roll of the ship. And those two little children, separated from their parents, terrified and crying in the dark.
And the movement of the ship would be incredibly violent. We need to talk about the meteorology and the wave mechanics of the Great Lakes here.
Right, it's different from the ocean.
Very different. Lake Ontario is relatively shallow compared to the ocean. In the ocean, storm waves have a long period, maybe 10 to 15 seconds between swells. The ship can ride up one side and glide down the other.
But on the lake?
On a shallow lake in a gale, the wave periods are very short, maybe 4 or 5 seconds. The waves are steep, aggressive, and relentless. The ship wouldn't be rolling gracefully, it would be slamming into walls of water, shuddering violently with every impact, unable to recover from one wave before the next one hits.
Every single time the bow crashes down into a trough, you hear the green timbers screaming. You hear the water rushing forcefully against the exterior of the hull, and you can probably feel the icy water sloshing around your ankles in the dark.
Because the impact of the waves is undoubtedly popping the caulking out of the seams.
The leaks are getting exponentially worse.
Yes, and above deck, the crew is fighting a losing battle against the elements. The sea spray is flying over the bow and instantly freezing onto everything it touches.
So the ship is getting covered in ice.
The rigging is coated in thick ice. The sails are freezing solid into sheets of wood, making them impossible to adjust or reef. And the sheer weight of the ice forming high up on the masts, combined with the heavy 4-pound guns on the deck, is raising the ship's center of gravity.
That sounds extremely unstable.
It is. It is making the Speedy dangerously top-heavy. It actively wants to capsize. It wants to roll over.
And amidst all of this, Captain Paxton is navigating blind. This is an absolute whiteout. He can't see the stars to navigate, he can't see the sun, he can't see the shoreline, and he can't see any landmarks.
He is steering his vessel entirely by the magnetic compass in the binnacle.
Which brings us to a crucial, terrifying geographic detail of this specific route. As the storm intensifies, the Speedy is entering an area of Lake Ontario known historically as the Sophiasburgh Triangle.
Okay, yes. Sophiasburgh Triangle.
For those who aren't steeped in Great Lakes maritime lore, this is a stretch of water off the coast of Prince Edward County that has a dark reputation that easily rivals the Bermuda Triangle. Over the centuries, nearly 100 ships have vanished in this specific localized area.
And one of the defining scientifically documented characteristics of the Sophiasburgh Triangle is the presence of severe magnetic anomalies.
Which messes with the compass.
Big time. There are massive, deep deposits of iron ore beneath the lake bed in that region. These deposits are strong enough that they can literally grab a ship's magnetic compass needle and spin it wildly off true north.
I love analogies, so think about it like this. It's like driving down a treacherous, icy mountain road in the dead of night in a car with failing brakes. You can't see out the windshield because of a blizzard, so you are relying entirely on your GPS.
A terrifying scenario.
So you don't know that your GPS has been hacked, and it is actively, confidently instructing you to steer your car directly off a 1,000-foot cliff.
Wow.
That is Paxton's reality. He is entirely reliant on his compass to keep the ship off the deadly, jagged, rocky shoreline of Prince Edward County. But the compass is lying to him.
What's absolutely fascinating here and terrifying is the psychological breakdown that occurs in a human being in a survival situation when your only piece of life-saving technology begins to feed you impossible data.
Right.
You are staring at the compass dial, based on the weather patterns you observed, that the wind is blowing from the northeast. But the needle says the wind is coming from the west. Your brain cannot reconcile what your eyes are seeing with what your skin is feeling.
You start second-guessing your own senses. Do I trust the needle, or do I trust the freezing wind hitting my face?
It's a horrible gamble.
If he trusts the wind, and the wind is actually shifted without him realizing, he might sail into the open lake and capsize. If he trusts the corrupted compass, he might be steering the ship directly into a rock wall at full speed.
He is forced to navigate a rotting, sluggish, top-heavy ship through massive icy waves, completely devoid of any reliable spatial awareness. It is total sensory deprivation combined with absolute adrenaline-fueled terror.
Which brings us to dusk on October 8th, the final sighting. By some miracle of dead reckoning, or maybe just sheer blind luck, the Speedy actually manages to find the approach to Presqu'ile Bay.
They are right there.
They're so close. The people on the shore, the parents of those children, the people who ride safely by the overland route, spot the ghostly silhouette of the ship's masts through a brief break in the driving snow.
And this is when Paxton fires the distress cannon. It's not a salute. It is a signal of absolute catastrophic desperation.
It's a cry for help.
He is telling the shore, we cannot maneuver, we are sinking, we need a visual guide immediately or we die.
So the people on the beach do exactly what we talked about at the beginning. They light the massive bonfires. Think about the surge of hope on that ship. The people below deck hear the cannon fire. They know what it means.
The relief must have been immense for a second.
Maybe a crewman yells down the hatch so that they can see the orange glow of the shore fires through the blizzard. The children think they are saved. They think they are going to see their parents. The politicians think they have survived the ordeal. Ogetonicut thinks he will actually live to see his trial.
But seeing the destination and actually reaching it are two very different things in the age of sail. The wind is howling out of the northeast. It is blowing directly out of Presqu'ile Bay.
So they're fighting the wind.
Yes. To get into the safety of the harbor, Paxton has to sail the Speedy directly into the teeth of the gale.
Wait, explain the mechanics of that, because a square-rigged or schooner-rigged ship from 1804 physically cannot sail directly into the wind. It's aerodynamically impossible.
Exactly. They have to perform a maneuver called tacking. They have to zigzag back and forth across the wind at an angle, slowly clawing their way forward.
Okay, that makes sense.
But to successfully tack a ship, you need momentum. You need speed to carry the bow through the eye of the wind, and you need a rudder that is highly responsive to the flow of water.
And the Speedy had neither of those things. It was heavily overloaded, incredibly sluggish, coated in thousands of pounds of ice, and rapidly filling with water because the bilge pumpers were undoubtedly failing at this point.
They were losing the battle.
The men on the pumps simply couldn't keep up with the water rushing through the sprung seams.
Every single time Paxton tried to bring the bow across the wind to tack, the gale would just slap the broadside of the ship and push it backward. They were making negative progress.
And the water is still rising.
The icy water is now breaching the main deck. It's pouring down the hatches into the hold where the passengers are trapped. The ship is dying, and it simply doesn't have the buoyancy or the maneuverability to fight its way into the bay.
The bonfires are burning on the beach. The shore is agonizingly close. The people on land can probably hear the wind screaming through the ship's rigging.
But as night completely falls, the whiteout swallows the ship again.
And the Speedy vanishes. The people on the beach keep the fires burning. They wait all night staring into the dark. When dawn breaks on October 9th, the storm finally clears. The wind dies down. The lake is calm.
But the water is empty. There is no ship.
In the immediate aftermath, the government response was frantic. They sent boats out to drag the bay and the surrounding area with heavy iron hooks.
They were desperate to find the wreck, not just for closure, but to recover the bodies of the colony's most important men and to salvage those 6 copies of the Constitution.
But they dragged the lake bed for weeks and found almost nothing. Just a broken chicken coop and a wooden compass box that eventually washed up on the beach opposite the bay.
Let's talk about what actually happened in those final dark moments, because there is a massive geological mystery intertwined with this sinking.
Right. We have to address the legend of the Devil's Horse Block.
Or the hitching post, as some of the older sailors called it.
Yeah, local mariners swore up and down that right in the approach to Presqu'ile Bay, right where the Speedy was trying to navigate, there was a monolithic stone pinnacle rising straight up from the bottom of the lake.
Like a natural needle.
A sheer, natural tower of bedrock that came up to within 20 centimeters of the water's surface. Basically, an invisible stone spear pointing straight up at the hulls of passing ships, hidden just below the waves.
And the prevailing theory for decades was that Paxton, blinded by the blizzard and struggling to control a sluggish, unresponsive ship, got pushed off course by the wind and slammed the soft belly of the Speedy directly onto the top of the Devil's Horse Block.
Oh, man.
If you imagine a fragile green timber hull that is already rotting, coming down on a solid stone pinnacle and heavy swells, it would have unzipped the bottom of the ship instantly.
The freezing water would have rushed in from beneath with the force of an explosion. The ship would have lost all buoyancy and gone down like a stone in a matter of seconds.
It would be so fast.
The people below deck wouldn't have even had time to scream, let alone scramble up the wooden ladders to the deck.
It is a theory that perfectly explains the utter suddenness of the disappearance and the complete lack of floating debris. But this raises an incredibly important question, because when those government boats dragged the bay searching for the Speedy with their iron hooks, they didn't just fail to find the ship.
Right, they couldn't find the Devil's Horse Block either. The massive, legendary stone pinnacle was completely gone. The water was deep and unobstructed.
And this is where the local lore gets absolutely wild.
It really does. The rumor immediately spread through the colony that the Speedy, being a 200-ton vessel full of cannons, struck the pinnacle with such violent, catastrophic force that it actually toppled the monolith.
Which is quite the claim.
Yeah, that it shattered the stone pillar at its base and dragged the entire geological formation down into the depths with the wreckage.
That was the story that was accepted by many for a very long time.
Wait, I have to push back on this. I really have to call it the absurdity of that legend. We are talking about a rotting wooden ship. A ship practically crumbling from dry rot, held together by rusting bolts and shrinking green timber.
Yeah, it was barely holding itself together.
And it strikes a solid bedrock geological formation. And the wood broke the stone. It snapped a monolithic pillar of rock in half. That sounds physically impossible. It sounds like a myth born out of a desperate need for answers.
Oh, I completely agree with you. It is physically impossible. But if we analyze this psychologically, it makes perfect sense. Catastrophic grief forces people and entire societies to invent mythologies.
That's true.
This sudden, absolute erasure of the colony's elite left a massive psychological void in Upper Canada. It's terrifying to admit that a simple, mundane autumn storm and the bureaucratic incompetence of a governor could erase the Solicitor General and the Supreme Court without a trace. It makes humanity look incredibly small and fragile.
Exactly. It's the same psychology behind the Titanic. People needed to believe it was unsinkable, so that its sinking felt like an act of God, rather than a failure of engineering.
People want grand explanations for grand tragedies.
It's much more comforting to blame a literal devil's monolith and to imagine an impact so titanic, so epic in scale, that it broke the very bones of the earth.
It elevates the tragedy. It gives the loss a mythological scale, rather than forcing them to accept a pathetic, wet, freezing death caused by an arrogant politician who wouldn't adjust his schedule.
Yeah, that's a bitter pill to swallow.
The people needed to believe that the lake didn't just swallow the ship, but that the sea swallowed the stone pillar, too. It's a collective coping mechanism for an entire society dealing with unprecedented trauma.
So let's look at the ripples of this tragedy, the echoes in the fog, so to speak. Because the loss of the Speedy didn't just break the hearts of the families involved, it fundamentally broke the political map of the colony.
If we connect this back to the bigger picture, the sinking devastated the young colony of Upper Canada. The loss of so many high-ranking legal minds, politicians, and business leaders threw the government into absolute chaos.
There was a huge power vacuum.
The Legislative Assembly had empty seats, the courts had no judges, and as a direct, immediate result, the grand plan to make Presqu'ile the district capital was completely, abruptly abandoned.
They looked at the dark lake, they looked at the missing ship, and they basically said, this place is cursed. We are not doing this. It's inconvenient.
Inconvenient was the exact bureaucratic word they used in the official government documents to justify the abandonment.
Wow, inconvenient.
Yeah. They moved the district center safely inland and down the coast to Amherst, which is now modern-day Coburg. The grand three-story courthouse at Presqu'ile, the entire reason for this doomed voyage, the building they sacrificed their lives to legitimize, was left completely empty. It sat there and rotted into the ground, a massive silent monument to colonial hubris.
But the scar in the landscape remained. You can't have a Gothic horror story of this magnitude without it bleeding into the local folklore and the cultural DNA of the region. The Speedy spawned generations of ghost stories.
Naturally. It has all the elements. The drama of the event, a doomed military vessel, the wailing blizzard, the elite politicians trapped in a dark cage with an accused murderer, the grieving parents waiting on the beach. It's a perfect, tragic Victorian ghost story.
Even today, if you go to Presqu'ile Provincial Park on a quiet, foggy autumn night, locals will tell you that you can hear it.
Hear the ship.
Through the thick gray fog rolling off Lake Ontario, they say you can still hear the faint, echoing boom of a cannon blast over the water. And beneath the sound of the waves lapping against the shore, the wailing.
The cries of the drowning passengers in the dark.
Yes, the terror of the elite, the prisoner shivering in his chains, and those two little children trapped forever in that freezing water. It's so deeply ingrained in the culture of the area that the Friends of Presqu'ile Park actually host ghost walks and stage plays about the Speedy to this day.
People are drawn to the tragedy.
The psychological scar is still incredibly tender. We want to be scared by it, maybe to remind ourselves of the danger, or maybe to keep their memory alive.
And that danger, that profound mystery, is still sitting out there in the dark. For over 2 centuries, marine archaeologists and amateur divers have been trying to find the wreck. It is considered the absolute holy grail of Lake Ontario shipwrecks.
Which brings us to the story of Ed Burt. And this is one of the most maddening, fascinating postscripts to the whole saga.
It really is.
Ed Burt was a highly dedicated professional wreck hunter. And in 1990, he shocked the maritime community. He claimed he finally found it.
He stated publicly and confidently that he had located the undisturbed wreck of the HMS Speedy. He even claimed to have recovered a few small, non-identifying artifacts to prove his case to the government.
So what was his plan?
His stated goal was to secure the legal salvage rights under maritime law and eventually build a dedicated museum exhibit to house the relics and tell the story properly.
But he wouldn't tell anyone where it was. He kept the exact GPS coordinates, a total ironclad secret, to protect the site from looters, which makes complete sense.
Right, you have to protect it.
You don't want amateur divers tearing apart a historical mass grave for souvenirs. But Ed Burt died in 2017.
And he took the secret of the location completely to his grave. He never revealed the coordinates to the public, to the government, or to his fellow divers.
Why? I genuinely struggle to understand this. Why would you spend your entire life searching for this monumental piece of history, finally find it, and then let the secret die with you?
It's a baffling choice.
Did he lose the legal battle for the salvage rights and decide that if he couldn't have it, no one could? Or did he dive down there, look into the rotting hull of that ship, see the iron chains, see the remains, and realize that this wasn't a treasure to be salvaged? Did he realize that the tomb should remain sealed?
We simply don't know. His motivations are just another layer of mystery added to the Speedy. Other dive teams are still out there right now, utilizing advanced side-scan sonar, sweeping the lake bed, hoping to rediscover what Burt allegedly found.
If they haven't yet.
No. As of right now, the Speedy remains entirely untouched. An underwater tomb sitting in the freezing, crushing blackness of Lake Ontario.
So we have a cascading, compounding series of horrors here. We have a ship built far too fast out of unseasoned, rotting wood.
Check.
We have an arrogant, autocratic politician who prioritized his political schedule and a photo op over human life. We have a brutal, blinding northeast blizzard.
A deadly combination.
A mysterious magnetic triangle that spun the compass and stripped a captain of his senses. And finally, the sheer unrelenting cruelty of the freezing water. All of these factors aligning perfectly to completely erase the elite power structure of a young colony in a single terrifying night.
It is a profound historical lesson in vulnerability and the limits of human control.
So, what does this all mean for us today? I keep thinking about the debris, the only things that came back. The lake took an 80-foot warship. It took 4 heavy cannons, 39 human lives, 6 handwritten, sacred copies of the Constitution, and the highest judges in the land. It swallowed all of it.
And what was left?
What did it spit back out onto the beach a few days later? A broken chicken coop and compass box.
The irony of the compass box washing ashore is truly staggering when you think about it.
Right. The very tool that was supposed to guide them to safety, the pinnacle of the navigational technology they trusted with their lives, was the only piece of the ship the lake decided to casually toss back onto the shore.
It's just haunting.
It is a chilling reminder. We love to dress up in the trappings of civilization. We build grand 3-story courthouses in the woods. We write constitutions on parchment. We appoint judges, and we wear fine wool coats.
We like to think we're in charge.
We constantly convince ourselves that we are the masters of our environment, that we are in control. But when you step off the solid shore and onto the water, none of that matters. The lake does not care about your constitution. The lake is the only judge.
That's a powerful way to put it.
And it is entirely, brutally indifferent to who you are or what laws you wrote. The sinking of the Speedy wasn't just a shipwreck. It was nature executing a final sentence on human hubris.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the abyss. Next time you find yourself standing on a shoreline looking out over a dark, freezing lake, take a moment to imagine what is still waiting out there in the cold.